Welcome back to App Stories. This episode is brought to you by Fitbod, Squarespace, and Pillow. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm doing all right. We're back in the saddle with App Stories. We actually had the episode that came out this past week, prepared a little bit in advance, so we would have a little more time off over the holidays. And we just concluded talking about a little bit about some of the thoughts we had for what our 2023s are going to be like. We spent a lot of time, I think, both of us over the holidays thinking about how 2023 is going to be different from last year.
Yeah, we've done a lot of thinking, I think, over the holiday break. I just there were many times when I just at night, instead of playing video games, I was just staring at my computer and just thinking and writing down notes and ideas. And on the App Stories Plus segment in the pre-show, I spoke about my yearly theme, based on the idea of this theme for a year from the Cortex podcast by my good friend Mike Hurley. So go listen to that if you're an App Stories Plus subscriber. But in the main show, we are going to talk about read later apps. So this is another category of apps that, it's not a new topic on App Stories. It's, saving links for later is very much something that we obsess about, sometimes maybe in an unhealthy way. I like to think that it's for research. But the thing is, we spend a lot of time on the internet. We're very much online, you and I, as people. We're very online. We find a lot of links, we find a lot of articles, and we love reading them. And I feel like over the past few months, it has really come down to two new contenders in this space: Matter and Reader by Readwise. Matter, came out, I want to say a couple of years ago at this point, or toward the beginning of last year. And you just did an in-depth review on Mac Stories. Really excellent story that, incidentally, I saved for later in Readwise.
All right, so, thank you.
I thought, we're going to do this episode. I might as well read about Matter in Readwise. So that was kind of fun. And Reader by Readwise has been in beta for a long time. It recently launched as a public beta on the App Store. So technically, it's still a beta version, but everybody can try it now. And if you have a Readwise paid subscription, you can get access to more features. You can use it on the web. You can use it on your iPhone and your iPad. And I believe they have an Android app as well. So these two apps, I think they are interesting in similar but also different ways. And they appeal to a similar audience, but with some very clear differences when it comes down to the implementation details and the overall philosophy. So before we get into these two apps, I think, John, it would be beneficial to have sort of a brief context, historically speaking, about read later apps and sort of how that market evolved over the 14, is it 15 years? Oh, this year the App Store turns 15. Yeah. 2008, 2023. Wow, 15 years.
And, Instapaper started even before the App Store was around, because Instapaper was a bookmarklet originally for saving articles for later. And yeah, I think the history here is very interesting, because the two apps that I think about when I think about the history of read later apps are Instapaper and Read It Later, which became Pocket eventually and is now owned by Firefox. And when Marco Arment built Instapaper, one of the main reasons he built it was because that original iPhone, I know it started as a web, bookmarklet for the web browser, but when he built the iOS app, part of the reason he built it was because the Edge network was so bad. It was so slow, coverage was terrible, and by using a Read Later app, you could download articles over Wi-Fi and have them offline for reading, whether you were on a subway or a bus or wherever you happened to be that had a bad internet connection, because the mobile networks weren't that great. And that's changed, obviously. I think, yes, there is still bad coverage in the world, but by and large, handling web pages and text is not quite the challenge it was for the original iPhone. And both Instapaper and Pocket were there was quite a competition between those two apps back in the day. There was a lot of back and forth in terms of features. One would, implement a feature, the other one would kind of copy it. A lot going on there, but it really set the groundwork for the next decade. But after, I'd say maybe 2014, 2015, things really quieted down with read later apps, and we didn't hear a lot. Instapaper is still around, Pocket's still going strong, but we didn't really see new entrants. I mean, I guess I should mention too that because it's going to be relevant to a conversation later, that there was an app that made had a very brief history called Readability that came out in about the 2012 or 2013 era. This was, the heyday of the iPad and apps coming out on the iPad. And it was out for a while, but it eventually shut down, and that one's no longer with us. But that's kind of where the history of these apps came from.
Yeah, and I remember, Read Later as a Firefox extension. I think that's how it started. And I remember when they relaunched as Pocket. Now Pocket, in a funny twist of fate, now Pocket is owned by Mozilla, the makers of Firefox, even though they haven't done a lot with Pocket over the past few years. And I believe the original founder of Read It Later than Pocket is now, left Mozilla, is now doing something else. Yeah.
Well, Instapaper, obviously went to Pinterest at one point. First, it went to a small group of indie developers.
To BetaWorks. I think it went to BetaWorks.
Went to BetaWorks, and then BetaWorks, the people at BetaWorks went to Pinterest. And Instapaper,
I completely forgot about Pinterest.
Yeah, Instapaper was kind of worked into Pinterest to a degree, but then they spun it back out, and now it's run by a small group of, former Betamax people. What is it? Was it Beta? What was it?
BetaWorks. Betamax is the VHS that didn't work out.
It's run by former BetaWorks people at this point, I think.
Yeah. So in any case, we now have these two very popular.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Fitbod. It's a new year, and this is typically the time that many of us start thinking about changing our fitness plans. So I'm very pleased to let you know that Fitbod is an easy and affordable way to build a fitness plan that's just for you. Fitbod's algorithm learns about you, your goals, and your training ability, and will create custom, dynamic programs based on your experience and any equipment that you already own. This is all in an app that makes it incredibly easy to learn how to perform each exercise. Personal fitness isn't about competing with other people. You don't want to look to others and try to do what they do. What you need is something that will work for you. That's when things will really stick, and you'll see the results that you're looking for. Everyone's fitness path is different, which is why Fitbod uses data to make sure they customize things exactly to suit your needs. Fitbod's powerful technology understands your strength training ability, studies your past workouts, and adapts to the available equipment that you have. That way, your training plan will maximize fitness gains by intelligently varying intensity and volume between sessions. Overworking some muscles while underworking others can negatively impact results. That's why Fitbod tracks muscle fatigue and recovery to design a well-balanced workout routine. The Fitbod app is simple to use with over 1,400 HD video tutorials shot from multiple angles to make sure that learning each exercise is a breeze. And it also integrates with your Apple Watch, Wear OS smartwatch, and apps like Strava, Fitbit, and Apple Health. 2022 wasn't a great fitness year for me, I'll admit. I moved twice, and one of the things that gave way to all the activity in doing that was my fitness. So 2023 is a year that I'm really looking to get back into it. I've been doing a lot of walking, a lot of running, but I also want to do more strength training, and Fitbod is perfect for that. I've got some equipment at home that's in my office. I can set up Fitbod, and in the privacy of my own home, watch the videos and make them a routine. That's the key, is making it a routine and also getting the exercises that really fit with what you need and your experience level, which I've really appreciated about Fitbod. Personalized training of the quality that Fitbod offers can be very expensive, but Fitbod is just $12.99 a month, or $79.99 per year. But you can get 25% off your membership by signing up at fitbod.me/appstories. Go there right now and get your customized fitness plan at fitbod.me/appstories. Again, that's fitbod.me/appstories for 25% off. Our thanks to Fitbod for their support of the show.
Solutions for saving links for later, Matter and Readwise. And as you wrote in your review of Matter, the thing that's most striking about it, I think, is the clean and elegant design, right? I think Matter is really polished. And I was a Matter user last year. I used it for several months. I actually signed up for their lifetime membership access.
Yeah, I think it was 3 years patron is what we signed
3 years.
up for. Yeah,
3 years patron. Yes, it's not lifetime. Just because I feel like I wanna support this kind of company, and I think what I really like about Matter is beside the design, I think they've been really open to feedback in terms of rethinking. This is something you touch upon in your story, rethinking the core focus of Matter, because when it started, it was very much one of those utilities that wants to wants to highlight the social aspect of discovering links from other people and putting, these discovery features in your inbox. But after feedback, they were able, with version 2.0 that came out a few months ago, to find their core functionality and structure into more like personal usage for saving links, right?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it was interesting because, all these apps have sharing components in them, which I think is good and appropriate. What the original Matter was all about, though, it was about following people too. And it was almost like it was trying to be a social network of readers. And it got in the way, really, frankly, I thought, of the good reading experience that was at the core of the app. And they recognized that. And I think in a move that is really kind of rare for a VC-funded startup, kind of tore up that model and refocus themselves on the experience of reading. And the app has really benefited from that, because when it was more of a social network, I looked at it and I thought, and I used it for a while, and I thought, you know what? This is really good as a reading app, but this other stuff is in the way. I'm going to wait and see what happens. And one of the reasons I didn't write about this until just this past week was that it didn't have a business model for a long time either. It was just free. And you and I had talked about this in the past. We didn't know where this was going. But when they announced that as of January 15th, in a couple of days from now, as we record this, they're going to start charging people for it, I thought it was time to write about it, because although it wasn't really, I guess, technically considered a public beta in the same way that Readwise's app has been these past several weeks, it really kind of was, especially once they tore up the original business plan or original feature set and started over last spring. And it felt like the right time to kind of dig into this app a little more in depth.
Yeah, and so now Matter is really organized with this relatively simple structure where you can save articles for later. Of course, they have native apps for iPhone and iPad. They integrate with the share sheet. They also have a web app that you can access from a web browser anywhere. You can save things for later. You can tag those items, and you can later browse by tag or filter with a bunch of different options that you showcase in the reviews. So, like, you can filter by date. You can rearrange articles manually in your queue. You can also browse by tag, filter by article length. Then you have your subscription inbox. This is something else that Matter is doing, Readwise is also doing. They basically give you an email forwarding address where you can send some of your newsletters to. And you can also add RSS feeds. But I don't think, John, you are a big fan of these RSS integrations in Read Later apps.
I am not. And I think Matter was very upfront about it in their blog posts. And this is one of the things I do like about Matter, is they're pretty transparent about their features. And I don't like it only because it doesn't fit with the way I use RSS. There is a purpose for having it, though, which is if there is a site, and I think this is very much geared towards people who are professional researchers. Maybe they're academics or scientists of some kind, and they have maybe a couple of professional publications that have RSS feeds where they want to read every single thing that comes from that feed. It works really well for that. So if you have a handful of feeds that are very important to you and not super high volume, if you're like me and have well over 100 feeds where you're mostly skimming headlines and picking out maybe 5% or less to read at any one time, you really don't want this in Matter or Readwise's app for that standpoint, because there aren't the kind of organization features that you find in an RSS client like Reader or ReadKit or Unread or any of the other ones. You don't have things like folders or other ways to kind of organize those feeds. But it does work if you have a very small set of feeds that you want in your Read Later app.
Yeah. And you can also follow authors, right? If you have a writer that you want to make sure you never miss whatever they publish, that's also possible. And another thing that they have, and this is in common with Reader by Readwise, is the ability to listen to articles. So these apps, Matter and Reader by Readwise, they're not the first ones to implement this feature. I believe the text-to-speech functionality was pioneered by Pocket, I want to say.
I think that's right.
Yeah, Pocket, years ago, in the, before these new AI machine learning tools to convert, text to speech with neural engines was a thing, Pocket did it at the time. And it was okay, but it mostly sounded like having voiceover, the accessibility feature, read you an article aloud. And it was fine, but it wasn't great. And I think Matter was the first time where we were able to really have a sort of HD quality, robotic voice that sounded kind of human, read you an article out loud, which is, I think, beneficial if you have a bunch of, at least that's the way that I use these features. If you have a bunch of short articles in your queue for things like news posts, like it's been excellent, for example, for CES announcements, and you're driving or you're walking the dogs or you're taking out the trash or whatever, and you can just listen for like 3 minutes to a story in rapid succession, get a bunch of those out of your queue. I think that's really useful.
Yeah, it's really nice. And it's, on the spectrum of voices, I think, we recently saw that Apple started offering narrations of books in the Apple Books store using AI-generated voices. And those voices are excellent. These are a step beneath that, but still very good. I'm not sure if Matter and Reader are using Polly, which is an Amazon service, or something from Microsoft, because they have a big library of voices as well. But they're quite good. I think between the two, I think Reader's is probably a little bit better. But both of them, I think, are quite listenable, especially for short sessions. The way I tend to use it is a little bit like you. What I'll do is if I get really behind, or I don't have any podcasts that I really want to listen to at the moment, and I'm running errands or I'm going out for a walk or something like that, I'll put these on. I'll kind of manually set up a queue in the order I want to listen to a few things, and then I'll just listen to them end to end. And it is a good way to kind of blow through a lot of articles all at once.
Yeah, I just think the Reader audio component sounds slightly better than Matter's. But I also know that Matter is coming up with their sort of improved quality version soon.
Right,
I think it was one of the features they promised for the beginning of 23, as they would begin charging people for access to these premium features.
The other thing we should mention too is the difference in designs here between the various versions of Matter, because Matter, I think, is best on, it really depends on the device. It's good on the iPhone, great on the iPhone. It's actually quite nice on the iPad mini too, because the iPad mini is really just a supersized phone in a lot of ways. It really starts to fall apart though on larger iPads because it just has wide margins. It's really a blown up iPhone app, which is a shame. And I think that's true with Reader as well. I don't get why today's crop of Read Later apps seem to not care a lot about the iPad, that it seems to be the lowest priority of all the platforms. Maybe because it's the smallest platform. I don't know, but in landscape in particular, you have very wide margins, which just isn't a great reading experience. I mean, all the book apps that are on the App Store have 2-page views on the iPad, and I think these apps should as well. On the Mac, Matter looks really great. I like how the tools are all along the left sidebar, and that's something I think should be brought over to the iPad as well. What I don't like about the Mac version of the app is that it's in a browser window. And that's not, this is not like John hating on Electron apps. This is me not liking the fact that although Matter has an excellent Safari extension, because it doesn't have a native app, when I'm in a RSS app, I don't have a good way to save. I don't have access to the share button because there's no app to populate into the share button. Instead, I have to first open things from ReadKit into Safari and then save them. And it's not, that's a relatively small step, but the amount of stuff that I'm processing in a day, it just gets in the way. And all of a sudden now I've got just a bunch of Safari tabs that I have to then close, which I don't like. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace is the all-in-one platform for building your brand and growing your business online. You can stand out with a beautiful website, engage with your audience, and sell anything: your products, services, and even the content you create. Squarespace has got you covered. With Squarespace, you can finally start that blog you've always wanted to create. Squarespace has a powerful blogging tool for sharing stories, photos, videos, and updates. You'll be able to categorize, share, and schedule your posts to make your content work for you. Then, so people can find your site, you can use Squarespace's integrated features and useful guides to help maximize your exposure in search results. Plus, Squarespace has a large collection of beautiful templates that make getting started easy. You just browse through a category that'll work for your business or your blog to find the perfect starting place, and then customize it with just a few clicks. Squarespace was the first place I went when I started my online business. Before I was working with Federico, I was selling apps, and I needed a place to show off what I had created. I went to Squarespace, and in no time flat, I had a fantastic site that looked professional and great. The templates really help here because you can grab a template, fiddle around with it, make some changes, and decide to apply it or not. If it turns out it's not for you, just go back to the templates and try another one. And then when you have something that works with the kind of content that you're publishing online, run with that one and finish up the site. It really doesn't take long to do. And you don't have to be a coder, which was important to me. It was enough already to get to the point where I knew how to build an app for the iPhone. I didn't want to also become a web developer just so that I had a site that explained what my app did and sent people to the App Store. So head on over to squarespace.com/appstories today for a free trial with no credit card required. And when you're ready to launch your site, use the offer code AppStories to save 10% off your first purchase on a website or a domain. Again, that's squarespace.com/appstories. And when you decide to sign up, use the offer code AppStories to get 10% off your first purchase and to let them know you came from App Stories. Our thanks to Squarespace for their support of the show.
All right, so let me tell you about Readwise Reader. I know that you have something you want to complain about when it comes to Reader. We're gonna talk about that. I think it's good to talk about the things we like, the things we dislike. So I started using Readwise Reader a month ago, soon after it came out. I think I wrote about it in Mac Stories Weekly, and I was already a Readwise subscriber. I've been using Readwise for a while to save highlights from Kindle to, it's got integrations with Obsidian, Notion, all these other things. And when Reader came out, I was really intrigued by it. I wasn't intrigued by some of the, sort of the secrecy surrounding it. But that's, every company can decide to hype their product however they feel like. But I gotta tell you, so Reader is a really excellent read later app. The parser is excellent. The text parser, this is one of the core components of every Read Later app. The thing that extracts text from articles on the web and displays that text to you in a more readable fashion is really, really solid and well done. I think it's slightly better than the Matter parser. There's always the occasional issue, right, with a missing link or a missing, pull quote or something.
Yeah, that's true for all these apps.
It's true for all these apps. You're dealing with HTML and CSS on thousands of different websites, and everybody does things differently. It's not a foolproof system by any stretch of the imagination, but it's really good. There are, I think, a few things that I love about Reader. First is the fact that this is the kind of app that is very research oriented, and it's very much designed for power users. I think that's the way that they market it. It's like a Reader app for power users. You got a ton of keyboard shortcuts. It's very keyboard driven in how you can do all things in the app, including navigating back and forth between your queue and an article, scrolling the article, adding highlights and entering notes without ever touching the screen or using the cursor. You can just do it all from the keyboard. The downside of this is that Reader is a cross-platform app. And so on the iPad, for example, they don't implement keyboard shortcuts in the way that you would expect from a native iPad app. I mean, let alone the fact that the UI is very much one of these like cross-platform UIs, right? They're different. It's webby, because it's the kind of product, from this new generation of companies. And Matter has the same design approach, right? They're designing for all kinds of users, and they do not expect to find the sort of native design and animations that you can find in Reader by Silvio Rizzi or Anybox or GoodLinks, for example. This is not that type of experience. So keyboard shortcuts, for example, they don't come up with the native keyboard shortcut menu on iPadOS. They're like Gmail keyboard shortcuts. You just need to press a letter like J, for example, to perform an action associated with that. But they have excellent documentation that you can look up and learn those keyboard shortcuts. And once you do, it's really amazing how you can do it all from the keyboard. I think that my favorite aspect of Reader is the triaging system that they have. Sort of the default organizational method for saving links and finding your links again. So by default, and you can switch this, you have multiple options on how you want to organize your queue, but the default one is the one I prefer the most. So by default, everything goes into the later section. That's your inbox. If you press a star icon on articles that you deem important or the most interesting ones, you can promote an article to your shortlist. And the shortlist is, as the name implies, a short list of stories that you want to get to as soon as possible. And then when you're done, everything goes in the archive. I know that you're not a big fan of archiving your stories.
I like to delete everything.
You like to delete everything. I like to archive because it's like email. It's in the archive. If you want, you can find it later. But by default, you have this organization of later, short list, and archive. And the reason I like it is I like to save a lot of stuff. And then every once in a while, like once a day, I can go in and, choose, okay, what do I have in my inbox? What's something that I want to read right away? I mark a few things as important, then I move back to the short list and I get through my stories in the short list. Even better, this triaging system is integrated with the share sheet. As of the latest version of Reader, when you save a story from the share sheet, you can immediately perform some actions from there, from the extension. So you can immediately promote something to your shortlist. So for example, when you published your Matter story, I used the share sheet and I immediately pressed the star icon so that later on another device, the article was already in the shortlist section of Reader. But you can also tag from the share sheet. And in the latest version of the app, you can add a note immediately from the share sheet. So that's really well done. And I will also mention that something that I think Reader does incredibly well, and I personally think better than what Matter does, is how it deals with highlights. I mean, this is not a surprise because the entire premise of the original Readwise product was to, collect highlights from around the web and your books. And that was the whole idea. So it's not a huge surprise that Reader already has excellent highlight functionality. But there's a couple of things that set it aside from the competition. One, you can highlight images in a story. So if you have a screenshot that you want to highlight, you can highlight that screenshot just like you can highlight a paragraph of text. And you can tag individual highlights. So if you're reading a story and the story is being tagged with Apple, but let's say you're reading a passage of text and that text is about, say, Stage Manager, you can highlight that specific, you can tag that specific highlight with the Stage Manager tag, which I have in my Readwise account. Yeah, so the ability to tag highlights, really well done. Those highlights, of course, they sync back to Obsidian, they sync back to Notion, so you can find them later, you can review them, search them, do whatever you want with them. As I mentioned, the playback of stories, I think the audio quality so far is better than the Matter text-to-speech engine. I think it's more natural. It's got more natural pauses. It sounds slightly more human, which I appreciate. Mm-hmm. And the other thing I need to mention is Reader is like a universal inbox for all types of links. Not all types of links have been implemented yet. But the idea, I think, is that in Reader, you will be able to save whatever you want, whether it's an article, a PDF document, a thread from Twitter. I really hope they add the Mastodon integration at some point. Yeah. YouTube videos, EPUB documents, you can push them all up to Reader. And the YouTube videos, that integration is incredible because we've seen apps to save YouTube videos for later. Like, for example, Play by Marcos Tanaka, really excellent utility to save YouTube videos instead of using the watch later queue from YouTube. But Reader does something that is so novel. I have never seen this feature anywhere else. When you save a YouTube link, in addition to presenting you with an embed video player, it also pulls the automatically generated captions from YouTube. So when you're watching a video in Readwise Reader, the text of the captions scrolls around in real time with the video in the bottom half of the screen. And that means you can highlight the part of the video you are watching. And later, when you tap on that highlight, it takes you back to the part of the video where the highlight is from. This is incredible. I've been watching many YouTube videos lately about different apps that I'm testing and different tutorials, and the ability to highlight a caption and jump back to that portion of the video. This is so good. It's one of those things where you try it once and you're like, yeah, I want to have this everywhere. Why didn't anyone else do this before? It totally makes sense. And so that's one of the many things that I like about Reader.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, I think this app is a fantastic app. It's really done a nice job, as you've kind of explained. And it's interesting. I'm curious. So those captions in YouTube are coming from YouTube itself, you think?
Yeah, it's the captions from YouTube. It's not. They're not doing anything else in terms of converting the video to text. Those are the automatically generated captions that YouTube makes, and somehow they have, I guess, found a way to pull them and to save them alongside the video.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, I agree. This is a really nicely done app. I mean, I do have a couple of things about it that aren't really to my taste, I guess. I do worry, especially with the plans to expand even further into what goes into your Readwise Reader inbox, that for some people it'll become a cluttered mess. But the triaging system does help with that. I mean, I think it's absolutely necessary when you're pulling all that kind of content into one place, including, PDFs and EPUBs and the like. It's a shame, obviously, it's not their fault, but you can't get EPUBs in there that have DRM unless you strip off the DRM somehow. I hear that's possible on the internet. But yeah, as long as it's a regular just EPUB file with no DRM, you can even highlight books, which is pretty cool. The thing that has bothered me the most about this app is an aspect of it that really goes back to readability, which I mentioned at the outset of the show, which is in 2012, readability came along and they started a subscription service for Read Later. And what they did is you would save your articles to Readability, and then Readability had set up a process where they would then take part of the money that they collected from users and pay it out to publishers. The trouble was that they never really talked to publishers in advance about getting them on board with this compensation system. But even bigger than that is they republished all those stories on their own server, so that if someone had a Readability link that they were sharing, an article they were sharing, it was a Readability URL. And Readwise is doing the same thing. They have this process for sharing public links. And this is not, there are a couple of different ways to share in Readwise. You can just share the URL of the original story, but they also have the ability to create a public link. And what that does is it creates a version of the story on their servers with a reader Readwise URL, and it'll include all the highlights and notes and everything, and then you can share it with the world. The trouble is you can share it with the world. And It's not like one-off sharing. It is republication of an entire article on Readwise's website, which is just not how sharing should work with Read Later apps.
Right. And it's wrong. And it's wrong because you are rehosting other people's content on your own servers. So what could happen? And I want to be extremely upfront about this. We asked Readwise to stop doing this for Mac stories and Club Mac stories. But what you can do is you can save a story to your Readwise reader. Then you can go in and share it, even without highlights, without annotations.
Right.
Just share the entire document, because this is the thing about Reader. They treat articles as documents. It's their terminology for this. So you save an article, you don't do anything with the article in terms of highlights and notes. You reshare it. Now you have a full copy of someone else's article, but on a domain that's reader.readwise.io. So you are effectively making a system to rehost other publications' content on Readwise's servers, which I think is the wrong approach. And that's why I think, as a publisher, I felt very uncomfortable with that. But truth be told, I mean, the Readwise team was, they fixed this right away. And I don't know if now whether they have or not a process for publishers to opt in or opt out of this system. But as a publisher, I think this is the wrong approach. And I agree with you, John. It's an aspect I don't like, even though the Reader product is excellent. I mean, I just, spoke about it for 20 minutes. But as a publisher, that aspect is worth examining, I think, given another pass. Because, giving people the ability to say, take a New York Times article and share the entire article outside of the context of the New York Times paywall or domain, I think is wrong.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's probably coming from a sincere place of trying to create
I think so.
Create a good experience for readers. And there's no denying that being able to share the entire, article in the format that Readwise puts it is a benefit to readers. The problem is cutting out the traffic and the original creators of the content, which, as publishers, as you said, is not something that we're particularly fond of. But as you also said, they were very nice enough to take that down from to exclude Mac stories and Club Mac stories from their servers for that purpose. And they did so right away. So it's, we're kind of beyond that. But
which, by the way, I want to clarify, does not mean you are unable to save Mac stories or Club Mac stories content to Reader. You can save it. You can, the text parser will work. It's just the sharing aspect, like taking an entire Mac stories or take an issue of Mac stories weekly and share it. Now you have a public Readwise link that you can share on Reddit or with other people on Twitter. That made me very uncomfortable. And if I were another publisher with, premium content behind a paywall, I would also be uncomfortable with this.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Pillow. More and more studies show that getting a great night's sleep can help improve your health and overall well-being. Pillow is a simple app that can help you become more aware of your sleep patterns and help you make informed decisions to improve your sleep quality. All you have to do is wear your Apple Watch while you sleep. Pillow will track and analyze your sleep automatically and give you a full report in the morning. You can also use Pillow with just an iPhone or an iPad if you want to do that with the press of a button before going to sleep. However, if you have an Apple Watch, you can get important information about your heart rate trends, variability, heart rate dip, and blood oxygen levels for each sleep session. You can also record sounds that occur during the night, things like sleep talking, sleep apnea, snoring, and other noises that might be disturbing your sleep. And if your Apple Watch is a Series 6 or newer, Pillow will display information about the intensity of those sounds during the night and give you a full rating of every exposure. Another valuable aspect of Pillow is helping you make informed decisions. Pillow has a dedicated section where you can discover trends, get personalized insights, sleep tips, and easily compare your sleep metrics to your weight, steps, caffeine consumption, and other health metrics. If you want to wind down and relax before going to bed or listen to something all night long, you can do that with Pillow's expanding collection of sleep aid sounds, guided meditations, bedtime stories, and music produced specifically for sleep. And if you have a chance to take a nap, use Pillow's power nap mode too. Pillow can wake you up at the lightest possible sleep stage using its smart alarm feature. And its battery life is minimal too. Last but not least, Pillow is also privacy-minded. All your sleep and audio data is encrypted and stored on your device and in your iCloud storage account using end-to-end encryption. You don't have to sign up for an account to use Pillow, and it doesn't collect or send your personal data anywhere else. Pillow is free to download from the App Store and comes with a set of great features that you can use for free every single day. If you want to try Pillow's premium features, there's also an option to start a 7-day free trial. Just visit pillow.app to get started today. Again, that URL is pillow.app. Our thanks to Pillow for their support of the show. I want to move on, Federico, and talk about one other aspect about both of these apps that I find very curious, because you mentioned briefly things like Anybox and GoodLinks. And there's a lot of similarities between those kind of link organizer apps and things like Matter and Reader, which is ultimately what you're doing is saving links. Now, I don't think Matter or Reader the people who make those apps would probably view themselves as link saving apps. They're really focused on the content that the links point to. And I think that is an interesting difference that has led them down a path to not offer automation support. Now, Matter does have one shortcut action, but only one that allows you to add things to Matter. Readwise's Reader has 0 shortcuts actions. And I don't understand why. I mean, I think it is this focus on content that has led them there. But I think it's a shame that neither of these apps offer shortcut support, because you may be doing, for instance, what you've been doing in Reader and tagging things with specific topics. And you might want to take all those links that are tagged with a particular topic and get them back out again as in bulk and drop them into a notes document. Or you might want to create a markdown link list from them. There's a million different things you can do with links, which are possible in apps like GoodLinks or Anybox, but it's just not possible at all in Read Later apps. And this is not new. I don't think Pocket or Instapaper have ever really been great with shortcut support either. But I really wish that the modern clients these modern Read Later apps would embrace automation and bring shortcuts into the mix.
Yeah, I agree. And I think what Readwise is probably going to end up doing, I believe they already have an API that you can access.
Okay, that's interesting.
I think I'm actually going to make some Readwise shortcuts pretty soon. It's one of the things I'm looking into. They have a web API, so they're more like a web service, right?
Yeah, that's
as
true.
We spoke about, the native component leaves a lot to be desired on Apple platforms, but they are a web service, and you have a web API, so you can use shortcuts with that. The one thing I want to mention before we close out this episode, John, is the incredible ability in Readwise to make custom sections. And I think this is, if you ever take Reader for a spin again, I think this is something that you will like. right now it's all based on a custom syntax. I believe they said they're going to make a UI for this, but you can make custom, basically like smart views, smart folders, whatever you want to call them, custom sections with advanced filters for all kinds of things. Content types, article length, author, dates,
That's cool.
domain, and you can mix and match those. And all these sections, in addition to ending up in the views page of the app, you can also pin these sections that you create in the home page. So the home view, which is different from the queue, but the home view is this collection of all the views that you've created. So for example, I have a custom view called gaming websites, and this view aggregates all links from a bunch of different domains. So whether an article is from Polygon.com or GameSpot or IGN or what do I have here? Eurogamer. You can say, I want to make this a view so that even if I don't tag these articles specifically with the video games tag, the view surfaces those articles because it filters them by domain. And you can mix and match multiple filtering criteria. Super well done. Right now, it's kind of unintuitive. They have a documentation page. It's kind of unintuitive because it's based on a custom syntax, but they mentioned they're going to make this easier to build with the UI.
Oh, that would be great. That would be great. Yeah. It's funny that you and I both refer to these things as links. I think both of these apps would want us to refer to them as articles or documents. It really goes back to that matter of perspective. I mean, you and I are very much attuned to the difference between a link, a URL, and content. Those are three separate, very different things. But in any event, yeah, that's a really cool feature. And I actually am taking Reader for another spin. I've been using it and saving things actually to both it and Matter and kind of comparing them side by side just to kind of get a feel for where the differences lie, which has been really an eye opener. And it's a good time to do it because right now Reader still is in public beta, so you can do it. At least what do they have, a 30-day free trial or something?
I think so.
Something like that. So, I mean, if you jump in, you can do that and get a good feel for it before you have to commit to pay anything. Yeah. So, all right, Federico. Well, I think that's a pretty good place to stop for today. We will be back next week. If you want longer, extended episodes of App Stories that arrive a day early, check out App Stories Plus. And if you're a Club Mac Stories Premier member, you can not only get access to our Discord and all the extra content that we create for the club, but you also get App Stories Plus with that too. It's really the best deal that we have of all of those things. And you can go and check out the details over at appstories.plus. I want to thank our three sponsors for this episode too. That's Fitbod, Squarespace, and Pillow. And of course, you can always find me and Federico over at macstories.net. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.